Well, they finished the season losing 14 of 21. They had their coach fired mid-season. And even if you tallied all of their wins and losses this year, they're still under 500. But they're in the Stanley Cup Finals, Randip. So really, who cares? How did the Habs get here?
It's such an unbelievable story because, yes, how many times do we count this team out? Remember, in the final 44 nights of the season, they had 25 games. They, as you mentioned, fired their coach. It looked like they were world beaters in the first couple of weeks of the season. And then later on, it looked like they couldn't beat anybody. But this is a team. Remember, the turnover in Montreal at the beginning of the year, it was significant. A lot of new pieces. They had to figure out what style they were going to play, how they were most suited to play their game. And over the season, what we saw a team mature in front of our eyes. They had some really good veteran players, but when we talk about younger players getting better, whether it's Kotkaniemi, Nick Suzuki, and now Cole Caulfield, these guys got into their game a little bit more. Styles make fights. They actually had a style by the beginning of the playoffs where all of a sudden that regular season game may be a little too loose. Maybe they couldn't get that offense. But Dan, with the style that the playoffs brought, when they made those signings and those trades, Josh Anderson, among others, and Tyler Toffoli, you could kind of see the blueprint of what type of game they wanted to play. You didn't see that necessarily in the regular season, but once the playoffs started, especially in Game 5 against Toronto, all of a sudden everything changed.
Well, there's so many different things here with the Habs. Yes, they started the playoffs, and those first 4 games against the Leafs were not very good. It was 3-1, and for good reason. The Leafs deserved to be up 3-1, but the script flipped quickly after that, and they started to get some momentum. They just railroaded the Winnipeg Jets in that 4-game sweep, and here against Vegas, a huge underdog, one of the biggest we've seen in a semifinal in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and yet they went shot for shot with Vegas. Sure, some of the games, especially early on in the series, were in favor of Vegas, but there was it's kind of after the Dominique Ducharme COVID test, and he's been isolating. But shortly after that, they made a couple of changes with their neutral zone forecheck and how they went about attacking Vegas. And that's when we saw the series really tilt in the Habs' favor, and they started to dominate play. Even though they lose Game 4, they dominated that game pretty much the whole way through. And Games 5 and 6, that they take the series back and win it, very much more even than they were early on in the series. I mean, this Habs team, you may not like it because it's definitely a more defensive style, but they found a way to really go up against the big boys, go up against some of the highest octane offenses in the league, and still have success. And so for me, coming in as a doubter of the Habs, the only thing I can say is, man, I was wrong. And this team has absolutely deserved where they are right now.
Okay, I say it all the time. You're probably sick of hearing it over the years, but when the playoffs come around, the style of the game changes, and it is suited for the Montreal Canadiens. To your point, yes, they started off slow, but in Game 4 against the Vegas Golden Knights, the key stat for me was, in regulation, they didn't give up a single high-danger scoring chance. That tells you it's not a fluke. It's not a lucky process that they had. They had an airtight defense that, importantly, kept Vegas to the perimeter, and even before that, Winnipeg, and even before that, Toronto in those final few games. But at the same time, we saw this group get more confident. And you said, they went shot for shot with Vegas. They absolutely did. And that showed you a couple of things, how they became more confident as these playoffs went on. They already had that defense. They have an all-world goalie in Carey Price. But one thing we started to see a lot more was that forecheck got better and better. You saw them play a little bit more physical. You saw them play with more speed through the neutral zone. You saw their counters get even better as the playoffs went. And especially in that Winnipeg series, you saw that speed and scoring chances generated off of that. And that to me was a confidence play. During the regular season, you didn't necessarily have that. They didn't have an identity or a style. In the playoffs, all of a sudden, they turned into that team, Dan.
Well, this has always been a team analytically that have had very strong numbers. Their shot differentials, their scoring chance differentials, even under Claude Julien, were always very good. And the knock was, well, they don't have the star talent. In the regular season, they hadn't been getting consistent enough goaltending from Carey Price. But now all of that is kind of changed. On special teams, the penalty kill has been unbeatable, as we've seen through these last couple of series, and certainly Vegas will attest to that. They've gotten the big saves when there has been the odd defensive breakdown. Carey Price has stonewalled pretty much everybody in the playoffs. And now you have the timely goals, whether it's coming from Caulfield or, the old-timey vet in Shea Weber. They're getting the timely goals that have kind of sunk them over an 82-game season and limited their potential through the years. But they have all of those things going for them now. And, I think about the build that Marc Bergevin has gone through here. And, Danault is having an incredible playoff, even though he doesn't have the points to back it up, made the great pass to set up the winner in Game 6 as well. But Kotkaniemi, Suzuki, through the middle of the ice, the way that Bergevin has built this team, maybe those guys don't have the same offensive ceilings as some of the elite centermen around the league do, but they are all really strong two-way, and they've shown that. They've bought in, and it's one of the big reasons the Habs have been able to flip that switch and play the playoff hockey that you have to play to win.
And I'm glad you brought up the center position, because I was like you. Before the season started, my question with this team was, are they good enough down the middle? Clearly, the answer to that is yes. But you look at the Vegas Golden Knights, that was their Achilles heel in this series. They could not react to the Chandler Stevenson. They did not have enough depth down the middle. And with, a team like Montreal, maybe to your point, they don't have that franchise center, but they got two players that are, developing into really good players. And Philippe Danault, we have to give this man credit. He shut down Mark Stone in this entire series. How often do we say a player shuts down Mark Stone? It doesn't happen. He's one of the best two-way players in the game. Philippe Danault said, not in this series. You're not putting up points. And that's an extremely impressive thing. I want to give Marc Bergevin his flowers, because he's a guy that was being ripped to shreds in Montreal, nationally. The PK Subban for Shea Weber deal. Go through the list. Even Joel Edmondson on a pretty, expensive deal. People are saying, is this worth it? Ben Sherratt, that money that he made, is it worth it? Go through some of those deals that he made, and not being able to, secure free agents prior to this year when they were going after Matt Duchene and a number of other players at different points in his tenure. This year, he got it right. So that patient approach, just being able to build this team in the long term with a lot of big, bold moves. But his team is in the Stanley Cup final. So I know there's been mistakes along the way, Dan, but I think we got to give Marc Bergevin his flowers. Whether they win or lose, he's gotten this team that a lot of people are questioning, because they had a goalie that was paid $10.5 million. They have Shea Weber, who's under contract until the end of time. And they were basically saying, why would you make these moves? As of right now, he looks like a very smart GM in that fire red suit, that closer suit.
Well, we started this segment talking about how did the Habs get here, and you think about it, it started 3 years ago with trading Max Pacioretty to the Vegas Golden Knights. That's when they acquired Nick Suzuki. They got Thomas Tatar in that deal, also a draft pick. But you think at that time, Bergevin is saying we need to do a reset, and I'm not going full rebuild because we've got Carey Price and Shea Weber, and we've got to give them a chance to win here in a not so distant future. So we're hitting that reset button, and that's where all of the critiques came in, as you mentioned, Randy. Hey, old takes, I suppose, can probably come after me with some of the takes I've had about Marc Bergevin and the Montreal Canadiens.
We all have.
Yeah, we all have. We've all gone down that road, because the NHL has kind of taught us you can't do a reset. Resets don't work. It has to be a full-scale rebuild, or it just won't work. And the Habs and Marc Bergevin specifically really fought in the face of that. And look, I haven't agreed with every move. I think they've had to overpay in certain aspects, but it's worked now. And they've got the young core to go with those veterans, the foundation that's been there pretty much for all of Bergevin's tenure, of Gallagher and Price and Petrie, and those guys that have really been the glue that's held this team together. Now you've added some of these young pieces through the draft, and Caulfield has been massive in these playoffs. Kotkaniemi, who's been much critiqued early on in his career for that third overall selection that Bergevin made, has really shown through in the playoffs, and Suzuki has been a massive find for them. So all of these things, the reset versus rebuild, Bergevin getting crushed for going down that road, well, now he's got a Stanley Cup final appearance at the very least to say, hey, maybe I wasn't so wrong.
the Montreal Canadiens, up until a couple of years ago, had some serious Green Bay Packer vibes to them, where you're saying, okay, where is the support? If Carey Price is Aaron Rodgers, why doesn't he have some support? Why doesn't he have players around him that can elevate? Are we wasting away a great talent? And Marc Bergevin was clearly listening to those criticisms. He added like nobody's business this past year, and even goes back further than that, committing to Jeff Petrie and, you know, getting that deal from Edmonton and maximizing that player and signing him to a long-term deal. But Tyler Toffoli, Edmondson, go through that list. One thing I appreciate about Marc Bergevin, whether you like his moves or not, this guy does not, you know, mess around. He likes bold moves. He might be patient, but at some point, Marc Bergevin is going to pull off a bold move. And look at that, his team's in the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah, 4 wins away from immortality. That's where the Montreal Canadiens find themselves right now. Can they pull it off? Let us know in the comments what you think, and we'll see you in the next video.